Live from Washington, D.C., Jay Sekulow Live. Phone lines are open for your questions right now. And now, Chief Counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice, Jay Sekulow.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the broadcast. There is an eruption in the Islamic Republic of Iran. This has developed over the last several days. However, in the last 48 hours, it has intensified to now multiple cities. It began with just a few hundred protesters really protesting some of the economic issues, but it quickly turned into dozens of cities, tens of thousands. There are not exact quotes coming out with the number of people involved. In other words, where you had at Tahrir Square in Tehran, you knew there were 1 million people. You don't have that here. You have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands throughout the city, and it's growing. That was called the Green Protest before. But what is very interesting here is what the protesters are saying. They are saying death to the dictator, that's the Ayatollah, death to Rouhani, that is the president, forget Palestine, not Gaza, not Lebanon, my life for Iran. And the leader lives like God while we the people live like beggars. So this is what's coming out very strongly from the protesters. There's also been reports of no to Hezbollah, because what has happened here is that millions, I would say billions of dollars of the Iranian people's money has been used on a foreign policy by the Islamic Republic of Iran to spread terrorism, and that's coming out of the mouths of the children, the mouths of the people that are suffering the consequences of this. And this is especially, even with the Obama administration, Andy, giving $1.5 billion in aid as part of the Iran deal. The end result is none of that, of course, helped the people of Iran, and we now have a mass protest going on that may well topple the regime, which would be incredibly great.
It would be great, and the president has said that, and the president has encouraged that, and the president is speaking out on that, and that's what we want to hear. We don't want to hear silence, and we don't want to hear $1.5 billion being given to Iran so that it can back Hezbollah and deprive its people. What we have here, Jay, is a protest that is organic in nature, grassroots, the poorer parts of the country. The slogans targeting inflation, corruption, Iran's involvement in Lebanon and Syria, backing Hezbollah, more money for the clerics, more money for food prices, cuts in cash subsidies to the poor, an increase in the price of food. These are the kinds of things that topple regimes.
Let's go to Than Bennett quickly here. We're coming up on a break. Than, what is the reaction in Washington right now as this is really unfolding on our screens right this moment?
Well, just to tease about that report, Jay, it calls it a very complex situation, different from previous situations. The reaction in Washington, you know why it's complex? You know why it's different? It's different because of the strength of the United States and the fact that there will be punitive ramifications if the Iranian regime continues to go this way.
You're 100% correct. The mistake of the Obama administration was when 1 million people were on the streets of Tehran, our government basically told them, stand down. That's what the United States said. Why? Because we now know that President Obama was already negotiating the Iran deal. Well, as the situation with Iran unfolds, let me tell you what we're doing at the ACLJ. We've served on the Department of State, the Department of Justice, and a lot of the agencies within those bureaucracies, a Freedom of Information Act request to find out exactly why the funding of Hezbollah through drug sales, and that investigation was shut down by the Obama administration. Your support of the ACLJ makes a huge difference. We want you to sign that petition. You could do that at aclj.org, or you can call us at 1-877-989-2255. That's 877-989-2255 to sign that petition and to stand with the ACLJ at aclj.org.
The Obama administration continues to lie about its involvement with Iran. First, the American people were told that the U.S. paid Iran $400 million. At the same time, 4 American hostages were released. Now we learn the real total was more than $1.7 billion. Unmarked bills, U.S. taxpayer funds to terrorists. The Obama administration directly lied to the American people about the Iran nuclear deal. It lied about when the negotiations began, who they began with, what the secret terms were, and how we sent billions of tax dollars to the leading state sponsor of terrorism. The ACLJ is aggressively fighting in federal court to hold this lawless administration accountable for its Iran lies. We filed a federal lawsuit that could force the administration to come clean, expose the deceit, and force real change. But we need your voice right now. Sign on to our committee to demand the truth about the Iran negotiations. Call 1-877-989-2255, or you can add your name online, aclj.org.
We did a great movie on the situation with terrorism and Iran called The Export.
We can create a modern international community that is respectful, that is secure, that is prosperous, that there are not tensions, inevitable tensions, between cultures, which I think is extraordinarily important. That's something that's very important to me.
He really wanted this to be a new beginning of the relationship between the United States and the Muslim world. He gave what has now become known as Obama's Cairo Initiative. Perhaps foremost, he wanted me to find a way to reach out to the Muslim world and engage much more with dominantly Muslim nations.
We do not consider ourselves a Christian nation or a Jewish nation or a Muslim nation. We consider ourselves a nation of citizens.
In Iran today, thousands of demonstrators in various locations kept up their public pressure on the Shah.
Khomeini is scheduled to return to Iran Friday after 15 years in exile. Today, the 78-year-old religious leader appeared to be in an uncompromising mood.
One of the chants today was bring back Khomeini, this man, presently living in Paris.
It was over 30 years ago that the revolution took place in Iran, led by a cleric named the Ayatollah Khomeini, who had actually been exiled out of Iran under the Shah of Iran's previous regime. Now, the Shah was put in place, and while there were a number of abuses under his regime, there was stability in the region, and radical Islamists did not have a foothold of control of a government. That changed in 1979. When the Ayatollah Khomeini came in and the Shah of Iran was removed from leadership, a major change and shift took place in the region. The region became radical, and it became radical in the context of Islam. And that has shaped not only Iran, but the Middle East, and even in the United States, even today. Now, what this movie is going to do is take a look at radical Islam's conquest, its mentality for control, and the various ways that it is engaging in infiltrating the West. Now, what we've seen so far, you've heard about jihad, lawfare, nuclear programs, and terrorism. But let's break it down. What is jihad? Jihad's the holy war. How do you engage in the holy war? You use the legal system as part of it. Sure, you use airplanes and turn them into bombs and run them into buildings. You use suicide bombers. You try to take over governments. But you also use the legal system, both domestic legal systems in the United States, but international legal systems as well, including the United Nations. And then, of course, there's nuclear programs. The danger of a nuclear threat is significant. It becomes part of the terrorist ploy, but is a ploy with tremendous consequences. The situation in Iran is not that much different than 32 years later as we look at the situation in Egypt. A lot of the issues that have developed over the last several months have revolved around the fact that what role would the Muslim Brotherhood have in a government in Egypt? And the short answer to that is any role for the Muslim Brotherhood starts looking an awful lot like Ayatollah Khomeini revisited. Now, I had the chance to sit down with someone who has been to the region in the Middle East many, many times. That is Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North. Let me ask you first, your sense when you talk about radical Islam, how significant is the conflict with radical Islam and its impact it's having not only in the region, but around the globe?
Jay, it's existential for us. Radical Islam intends that all of us live under Sharia law. They are willing, and not just willing, but intend to die to make it happen. Of course, there's no greater honor than to kill an infidel in the process of getting killed yourself. And so if you look at what we've been up against, not really since 2001, actually going back to 1979, when the Ayatollah Khomeini goes back to Qom from Paris and begins to organize not the Iranian Revolution, but the Islamic Revolution.
Ayatollah Khomeini left Tehran and moved to Qom, which is Iran's holy city, where he lived until the Shah deported him 15 years ago and may now wish he hadn't. He said as he went he would keep control of the country, as he put it, for the 1 or 2 years he has left to live.
Ayatollah Khomeini returned to the Shah's least favorite city, Qom, where religious opposition to the Shah began.
Everybody looked at it, and I confess to being part of the Reagan administration 1981 onwards. We looked at it, look, it's just 10% of Islam, we don't have to worry about this.
Khomeini was forced to leave Qom 15 years ago after the Shah's troops killed hundreds of people in an unsuccessful purge of dissidents. But Khomeini indicated he will maintain control and direction of the government because he believes there should be no separation of church and state. And Khomeini said he does not want a democratic republic. He wants an Islamic republic.
It has become a global threat. It's a threat right here in the United States of America. And it's growing. It's growing in large part because we have a commander-in-chief, head of state, chief executive, who refuses to name the enemy. The enemy is radical Islam.
The President of the United States goes to the University of Cairo. He says that in America, although there's a lot of Christians, we're not a Christian nation. We're not a Jewish nation. He says we're a nation of principles, which is a non-statement. Then you look at the fact, what you just said, that in 1948, our leadership, the government, and others in the world understood that there was this spiritual bond, if you will. Now we have this complete shift in relationship. You've got an Iranian threat that most of us believe is real, but you've been there more than most people. You know the people involved, you know the military, you've reviewed the documents, you've seen the evidence, you've been there firsthand. How serious is the Iranian Islamic threat to world stability?
It will change the world as we know it today if the Iranians, and I believe that they're headed in this direction, put on the end of one of those North Korean provided missiles anything that looks like a warhead. And the Iranians are building not only the warheads, they have the means of delivering it, and I'm telling you, target number one is Israel. The Israelis cannot abide that. It is truly an existential threat.
As a lawyer, I like to deal with evidence, and part of that evidence is to actually take you to the region where the conflict is developing. That is, as Oliver North just said, an existential threat in the Middle East, so we traveled to Israel. We had the opportunity to talk with members of the military, members of the government, some of the leading journalists in the area, to get a first-hand look at how the threat of radical Islam and Iran impacts Israel, the region, and the world. I had a chance to sit down with one of the most noted journalists in the Middle East, Renan Bergman, to get his impact and impressions as to what's happening in the region right now as it relates to Iran and possible war and conflict with Iran. First, very basic and fundamental question. Is there a war going on with Iran right now?
This is the longest ongoing war in the Middle East. It has been taking place since Ayatollah Khomeini took over the Islamic Republic of Iran in the 1st of February 1979. It has been going on every day until this minute. Under the public's radar, nobody knows the full details of that. But from almost day one, the Islamic Republic of Iran tried to obtain nuclear weapon and tried to export the revolution to proxy jihadist movement in the Middle East, trying to imitate the geniuses in the revolution of Khomeini to other places. And at the same time, the secret services of the United States and Israel declared war on Iran, and this is the clandestine war between these two forces.
Iran was a free country. One has to remember, under the Shah, very advanced, very Western, very scientifically very impressive. It was taken over by this regime of fundamentalism, and really Black Night came over Iran. So definitely America stands and works for the values that Iran is against. But there's a special role for Israel here. Iran uses rhetoric that we haven't heard for decades. Eliminating Israel. Israel should not exist, has no right to exist. Israel, I quote, is a cancerous tumor that should be removed from the Middle East. It's said again and again. So when you see a country that says you are not legitimate, you will not exist in the end of the game here, and we go nuclear and involved in terror like no other country, to put it in an understatement, it's a cause for concern.
Well, right now, Iran is the world's central banker to international terrorism. It funds Hamas, Hezbollah, terrorists in Afghanistan and Iraq and around the world. If you add to existing Iranian activities the capability to deliver nuclear weapons anywhere in the world, you make Iran a world power and a world threat. That's why it is legitimate for the United States, Israel, or others to take action now in self-defense to prevent Iran from continuing to violate its own treaty obligations and obtain nuclear weapons. It's not a desirable alternative, to be sure, but the preemptive use of military force in this case is actually far preferable to the world as it would be once Iran gets nuclear weapons.
But it's interesting in a way, you see, let me go one step deeper. The paradigm that we knew was the paradigm of nation states. Israel is a Jewish state, they are Arab states. Now you see a religious approach. They speak not in terms of political dialogue with Israel, what the borders should be, what this policy should be, but they speak of illegitimacy in the name of God. From Iran, from Hezbollah, and from Hamas, you hear that it's a religious commandment that Israel should not exist, that a non-Muslim state cannot be here. If this has the upper hand, this trend, it's going to be tougher. This layer of religious fanaticism on top of political debates makes debates almost without a resolution. Because, you know, gods never compromise. People do. Right. If you get it from God that you can't have an enemy alive, then what hope do we have? So I think it's the interest of really world order that this new trend of making everything religious commandment and the fanaticism that goes with it loses this fight.
Well, as the situation with Iran unfolds, let me tell you what we're doing at the ACLJ. We've served on the Department of State, the Department of Justice, and a lot of the agencies within those bureaucracies, a Freedom of Information Act request to find out exactly why the funding of Hezbollah through drug sales and that investigation was shut down by the Obama administration. Your support of the ACLJ makes a huge difference. We want you to sign that petition. You could do that at aclj.org, or you can call us at 1-877-989-2255. That's 877-989-2255 to sign that petition and to stand with the ACLJ at aclj.org.
The Obama administration continues to lie about its involvement with Iran. First, the American people were told that the U.S. paid Iran $400 million. At the same time, 4 American hostages were released. Now we learn the real total was more than $1.7 billion. Unmarked bills, U.S. taxpayer funds to terrorists. The Obama administration directly lied to the American people about the Iran nuclear deal. It lied about when the negotiations began, who they began with, what the secret terms were, and how we sent billions of tax dollars to the leading state sponsor of terrorism. The ACLJ is aggressively fighting in federal court to hold this lawless administration accountable for its Iran lies. We filed a federal lawsuit that could force the administration to come clean, expose the deceit, and force real change. But we need your voice right now. Sign on to our committee to demand the truth about the Iran negotiations. Call 1-877-989-2255, or you can add your name online, aclj.org.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. So we have got a situation unfolding in Iran that is breathtaking in scope. Before, in 2009, during the Green Revolution, it was just Tehran that was impacted. And you're now looking at this map. It is the entire country is engulfed in these protests. And these protests are aimed at the clerics. They're aimed at the Islamic regimes. They're aimed at the terrorists. They're aimed at Hezbollah. They're aimed at Hamas. They're aimed at the Palestinians. They're aimed at Gaza. You got a 29% unemployment there. The country is being depleted of its assets to support terrorism and to export the Iranian revolution. And the people of Iran have had it. And the President of the United States, President Trump, is standing with the people, unlike the previous administration, which tried to shut down those protests. This is a major sea change differential that's happening right now. Now, Dan Bennett just found out, we just got a comment coming in from Speaker Ryan. I'm looking for Democratic content statements as well. This needs to be a bipartisan move, and we're going to lay out a plan tomorrow on how to do the transition here if this in fact happens. Dan?
Well, Jay, in addition to Speaker Ryan, we are hearing from Brad Sherman from California, a Democrat, Joaquin Castro, and Brendan Doyle. Don't have their exact quotes with you, but they have expressed support for the protesters. Here's what Speaker Ryan said. He said, "It's important that we support the nonviolent protesters in Iran. This is the result of a regime more focused on propping up terrorist organizations than addressing the plight of its citizens." Jay, one thing I would say, though, the way that you sustain the comments of elected officials is by continuing to fuel them with information of what's happening. That's why why we're participating in the FOIAs. If we don't get that information out, Jay, this support you're seeing, it will go away.
Well, let me tell you this. I'm going to be more bold. Here's what I think we should support. A toppling of the regime. Because, for instance, Hillary Clinton just sent out, the Iranian people, especially the young, are protesting for freedom and future they deserve. And then she says, I hope their government responds peacefully and supports their hopes. Hey, I hope the government falls. Okay? I hope the regime falls now. And that the Iranian people, the Persian people, can regain their sense of dignity, self-worth, and be a functioning member of the nations of the world. I hope the regime falls. I don't like all this. Well, I hope the regime is better. They better take their consideration. The regime needs to be toppled, and it's the Iranian people that are doing it. All right, Logan.
Let's take some calls. Let's go in order of people who called in. Let's go to Doug in Lincoln, Illinois on line 5. Thanks for holding.
Hey, Doug, go ahead. You're on the air.
How much of an impact would Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, what kind of impact does it have?
Oh, no, I think it emboldened the people. I think it emboldened the protesters that are out on the streets in Iran. Look what they're saying. No to Gaza. No to the Palestinians. No to Hezbollah. No to Hamas. No to the clerics. So I think they're saying we've got a president in the United States that's willing to stand up for Israel would be an ally of Iran if it wasn't an Islamic Republic. So I think, Harry, that they clearly had an impact.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that happened after President Trump recognized Jerusalem is that it exposed the Iranian leadership support for Hamas and Hezbollah as opposed to the interest of the Iranian people. They were putting the interest of terrorists ahead of their own people. And in light of 29% unemployment, this makes no sense to common, everyday, working-class people in Iran.
I think that's absolutely correct. Logan, let's go ahead and grab some more calls. We'll do as best we can.
Yeah, sorry about that. Renee's calling line 3. You're on the air.
Hey, Renee, go ahead.
Hi, Renee. Hi, Renee. Hi, Jay. I feel like we're friends already.
Yeah.
In 2003, there was a book put out called Reading Lolita in Tehran. I don't know if you remember that. It was written by a lady who was a professor who was kicked out of the university when Ayatollah came back.
Right.
Those students then, if they were about 20 years old 14 years ago, that whole group of people are in their 30s now.
That's exactly right.
It's not just college.
No, you're exactly
students.
no. This is much broad-based. This is not just college students. This is those that were college students even 6 years ago have now been trying to work and not been successful at working. So they because they've not been able to get jobs. The money that came from the United States went right out to the terrorists, and that's why the reaction is so strong. Very, very important statement. We're going to try to get to as many calls as we can.
All right, Dan, you're on the air, line 4.
Hey, Dan, go ahead.
Jay, congratulations on achieving that goal. The $1.3 million.
Oh, thank you very much. Listen, hey, a huge thank you to all of our ACLJ friends that are listening to this broadcast now or watching us. We couldn't have done it without you, and what an impact you had. We exceeded our goal, actually. So thank you for that. But go ahead.
Yeah, Iran has been identified as being working in partnership with North Korea on the North Korean nuclear program. Given that this is probably going to happen, what impact do you see that having on North Korea and things in general?
Yeah, so Wes, the relation between Iran and North Korea has been cooperative. Mm-hmm. This would change that dramatically.
Absolutely. Iran, part of the money in Iran has gone to North Korea. They swapped technologies. And, this has a direct impact on that. It's the government of Iran that supports North Korea, not the people of Iran.
All right, let's get another call. Then I got a question. I want Andy to restate something he said earlier I think is very important.
Nancy, you're on the air.
Nancy, go ahead.
Hi, Jay.
Hey.
Thank you for everything you do. I just want to ask if there's any leader or organization that would rise to the top as leadership, and also
inside Iran?
What role would Russia play in this?
Well, Russia would try to prop up the regime. I mean, there's no question about that. Russia, Andy, would try to prop up this regime, the Ayatollahs.
Anything that they can do to oppose the American interests, secretly, overtly, covertly, however they're going to do it, they're going to try to support the regime. But, you mentioned something from the irrelevant Hillary Clinton. Yeah. Can you believe that she would make a statement like that?
No, that's because
I want this government to respond to what its people are wanting to. What a ridiculous statement to make.
But, Andy, say it again. It's important for people to hear this. When these regimes fall, it happens almost instantaneously.
Instantaneously, Jay. When I looked at this when I happened to be in Strasbourg in France in 1989, watching the crumbling of Romania and Ceausescu. One day he was there. The next day, he was executed, lying dead with his wife in the courtyard of a building after a summary trial that had occurred, and they had a new government and a new and a whole democratic system had been in place in Romania, and it happens instantly.
Yeah, it does. So you're looking at change that can happen in an instant. And Harry, we're not going to be able to get to the other two calls right now because we're hitting topics here. But let's send them the book. So let's get them the material. Harry, quickly here on the government plan of transition like this. There is a constitution they have, but their constitution was the Islamic constitution. So we need to take a look at their previous constitution and how they were set up.
Yes, and encourage them to adopt democratic principles. This will help with respect to the transition. Hopefully, this will lead to weakening the influence of Russia in the region, and it may lead ultimately to the demise of Bashar Assad in Syria. That would be a helpful development as well.
Again, there's a lot going on the streets of Iran right now, and your support for the ACLJ let us get to the bottom of what the U.S. policy was in the previous administration, especially why we allowed Hezbollah to raise $1 billion in net profit to fund their terrorist activities, while the administration shut that down, shut the investigation of Hezbollah down to get the so-called Iran deal. Now the Iranians are taken to the streets in record numbers. So we can get that information. It'll be very helpful. Again, let me encourage you to do that at aclj.org to sign that petition to get to the bottom of this, or to call us at 1-877-989-2255 and add your name and support, 877-989-2255 or aclj.org.
The Obama administration continues to lie about its involvement with Iran. First, the American people were told that the U.S. paid Iran $400 million. At the same time, 4 American hostages were released. Now we learn the real total was more than $1.7 billion. Unmarked bills, U.S. taxpayer funds to terrorists. The Obama administration directly lied to the American people about the Iran nuclear deal. It lied about when the negotiations began, who they began with, what the secret terms were, and how we sent billions of tax dollars to the leading state sponsor of terrorism. The ACLJ is aggressively fighting in federal court to hold this lawless administration accountable for its Iran lies. We filed a federal lawsuit that could force the administration to come clean, expose the deceit, and force real change. But we need your voice right now. Sign on to our committee to demand the truth about the Iran negotiations. Call 1-877-989-2255, or you can add your name online, aclj.org.